And I read quite a lot of this as well, I think. I was very moved.
Sorry to interrupt, but we're, as I said earlier, we're very privileged to have two ladies with us who've done a lot for the Somali community around the world. Dr. Edna, whom many of you know and have heard of, remarkable woman. She is the first Somali nurse, I think I'm right in saying, certainly the first midwife. She is the daughter of a doctor. She was born, I shouldn't say it, but 1937 in Hargeisa. Your father was a doctor, I understand, as well. But she was married initially to the first Prime Minister, one of the Prime Ministers of Somaliland, Mohammed Goodale, whom we probably, most of us, remember from our time in Somaliland. She trained in England, and she is an honorary fellow of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. I think you trained, am I right in saying, at London, not London University, but the South Bank?
It was the Borough Polytechnic at the time, yes.
That's right.
But then I later trained at Hammersmith in West London.
But you spent time as a minister in the Somali government, as foreign minister, and also as Minister of Welfare and Social Development. But probably the way we know her most is that she is responsible for building the Edna Adan Maternity Hospital in Hargeisa, and is also a pioneer in the struggle for the abolition of female genital mutilation. She's also president of the Organization for the Victims of Torture. So she has had a remarkable background. I think also you worked for the United Nations at one stage.
Many years.
She has very kindly agreed to come here today, and she's going to tell us a lot about her background and about the hospital and about the old veterans who we have been supporting. I don't know if you all realise that mainly due to Tony Randall, we raised just over £4,000 for the Somali veterans who were without medicines and needed support. And I hope that money has arrived. But I know it was something that a lot of us felt very strongly about. So, Edna, thank you very much for coming today.
Well, it's a very emotional day for me today because I'm with people who know where I come from, Somaliland. And very often I have to tell them where it is and show them a map and how the name came about, former British Somaliland Protectorate. But I'm glad that you have, not only do you not only not know about it, but you are, most of them, all of you have been there. And some of you were even born there. It's a great honor and a pleasure and a very humbling experience to be with so many friends. I'm a product of Britain. If I've done anything right, it's thanks to the opportunities that your people, your government, Britain has given me. And if I do anything wrong, just blame it on the Brits. It's with But what I was taught at a time when education for girls was considered totally undesirable, the opportunities I had to come here and be taught a profession that I feel very passionate about has helped me to serve my people and humanity as best as I could. And it has given me something to live for. I came here in 1954 at the age of 17. Had never seen a double-decker bus. Had never been on a lift. Had never seen an escalator, a moving staircase. Is that my telephone? Not out. Okay. And I was taught by the best. I was taught compassion. I was taught professional skills. I was taught how to care for the sick. And I was taught standards. And there's only one way to do things, and to do it properly. At a very young age, I watched my father working in Erigabo and Berbera and places like that, and seeing how much of his life, of himself he was giving to the sick. That was my very first lesson of compassion. And if you're caring for the sick, it's not only the injection you give them or the wound that you dress, but it's the way you appreciate, you value that person as a person, regardless of how old or young or poor or ugly or dirty or smelly or whatever is oozing out of parts of their body. It's a person who has dignity, and whose dignity one needs to respect. I had the privilege of meeting my very first husband. I've been married 3 times. I'm hopeless as a wife. And I pity the 3 husbands I've had. But nobody goes into a marriage saying, I want a divorce in 5-10 years' time. You think, this is the right person. This time it's going to work. But for some reason or other, it did not for me. But then when we divorced, we become good friends again, because we have nothing to fight about. And from that very young age, when I came out here, arrived here in the month of October, and on a New Year's Eve event for overseas students, I met the man who was to become my first husband, Mohammed Ibrahim Igal, who came and asked me for a dance, and I danced. And where was I from? Somaliland. And where are you from? Because he didn't expect to see a Somali girl, and I didn't expect to see a Somali man. And that was how we first met. In 1954, I did 2 years at the South Bank University now, the London Borough Polytechnic. And then I did my nursing, my 3 years nursing. I graduated as a nurse, registered nurse. And then I did my midwifery at Hammersmith and Lewisham, and my domiciliary midwifery was all in Peckham and Camberwell and Kennington and the Oval and Brixton, and my old bicycle and my old bags. And they taught me all I needed to know, or as much as I needed to know to pass the exams, to become a qualified midwife. And in 1961, after Somaliland had gained its independence from Britain, I went home as its first qualified nurse midwife. Found a country where the British had left. The sisters that I used to see with the long capes had left. The doctors I sometimes worked with, I don't remember if any of you remember Dr. Ash and Mrs. Ash. There was a husband and wife team. And Dr. Ash, Mrs. Ash, I was her interpreter at age 14 or 15 when I came back from Djibouti. And the first time I saw a female with a title of medical doctor. And I said, oh, women can become doctors. It was something that I had never seen. I'd seen sisters, but never seen a female. She became my first role model. And I became her voice and her ears. And whenever they called her at 2 o'clock in the morning, they would ask me to come along as well, and I would be the person who would interpret for her to find out what was wrong with the patient and what intervention needed to be taken to save that life. Someone who would leave her house in the middle of the night and come for this emergency. These are important lessons for a 14, 15-year-old girl. Coming to save lives of people she did not know, people whose skin color was different, in a country that was not her own. But that taught me compassion, and it taught me a sense of responsibility. That if you take on the pledge of caring for the sick, you cannot choose when and how you will care for them. You'll care for them when they need you to care for them, and that's it. And emergencies don't give you appointments. They happen when you least expect them, and you deal with them as best as you can. Having come here and admired the people who taught me, the ward sisters and the staff nurses, the tutors, the doctors, the consultants, the housemen, and seeing that everybody does it the same way. You don't sort of say, oh, nobody's watching, so I can just do this, whatever, you know. You do it properly because you are your own supervisor. Your conscience is your own supervisor. So when I went home to Somaliland in '61 and found no trained staff, it fell upon me to try and train as many as I could and try and teach the ones who were already there, or the auxiliaries, to show them how to do things differently or better. And most of all, they also taught me how to work in a hospital that had very little resources, where we had to boil the syringes and the needles. And needles, the points of the needles break and get blunt. But you still have to get that injection into that person's body. And boiling metal syringes and needles in a metal container blunts them. And it gets them to gather a lot of calcium and sediment, so that they're no longer smooth and going to be smooth injections. They're painful injections, not only because the content, the product being injected is also painful, but the needle itself. And for me, it was a shock. But I had no syringes. That's all they had, and that's all I dealt with. We had one doctor, Dr. Ali, who was also trained in Scotland, and when he was busy, he would say, "Edna, deal with it." And I would have to deal with situations that I was not trained to deal with. It taught me a lot. And it also taught me to deal with a condition, with a situation. I'm going to leave this with you, and I'm going to leave it with the nurse, because there's pictures that are not very pretty to look at, and parts of the female body, it's female. But all the years that I had been a midwife here, I had never delivered a woman who had been mutilated. People had normal bodies, and babies were coming out as God had intended them to come out, of where they had, been growing for the, 9 or 10 months of the pregnancy. And I didn't know how to get that baby out. And it was the auxiliaries who taught me and showed me how to cut and just widen the passage for the baby. And it was so traumatic, and it was so revolting, and it was so repulsive. And it brought my own experience back to surface, because at age 7, I too had undergone this. But I never imagined that, the act of procreation and the delivery of babies and what had been done to me, I never really connected it with myself. But this is how it was. And I had to be taught that. But then you don't speak about things like that. You don't talk about unspeakable parts of the body. But you feel your anger continues. About 3 years after I went home, I re-met my first, the person I had danced with in 1954, and we married. And then we moved to Mogadishu, because that's where he was a member of parliament at the time. That's where we went. So I started training nurses in Mogadishu, because the WHO had an office there and a training department. That's where we continued. That's where, again, WHO, because I was working in the WHO project, they found me that I could do the same thing in Libya. So I was hired by the World Health Organization and sent to Libya, which became my first international duty station, where I was training nurses and midwives. In '67, Mohammed became a prime minister, and so I came back, and I need you here. Went back and did what we could, brought peace back to the country, made a rapprochement with Kenya, with Ethiopia, I did a lot of work in the hospital in Mogadishu. 2 days a week I would work in the hospital. Prime Minister's wife, so what? And then in '69 there was the military coup. There was the Russian-backed communist coup led by Siad Barre, which put Hamid in jail, me under house arrest, took everything we had, changed the whole lives of the country. And I think what was the damage that was done then is still, felt in the Horn of Africa, which has not really settled. There was a very big difference between former British Somaliland Protectorate, the way we do things, the way we live, the way we behave, the value of honor, the value of the nomadic, the culture of respect for each other's property and self. And in neighboring Italian Somalia, with so many different nationalities living together, because Somaliland, we had that advantage of being all homogenous. We're all from the same background, similar clans. The people in Somalia did not have that. Some speak different languages, some look different to others, and there's always been at war with each other. And when we united, we did not feel comfortable with joining a club that did not have the same principles that we had. And in 1961, a few months after I returned home, there was the attempted coup d'etat to separate Somaliland, to withdraw from that union that we entered into with Somalia, and to go back to the drawing board and reconsider and renegotiate our terms of union, because the current terms that we found ourselves in with Somalia were not very appropriate or suitable or acceptable to us. And that's when the punitive measures began to be exercised against the people of Somaliland. Life continues, but the love that we had for each other, Somaliland with Somalia, was damaged forever. And in 1982, after a whole lot of oppression and a lot of bombings and genocide, there was an outright war, civil war, to separate Somaliland from Somalia. And that's when the Russian MiGs were flown to bomb cities, Hargeisa, flattened, Burao, the same, wells poisoned, children, the tallest, the strongest, the healthiest looking children called out of classrooms, 13, 12, 14, 15-year-old kids. You come here, and they would just take them out as blood banks and just bleed them for the army, and take as much blood out of that child as would come out, and then the child would faint, and they would just throw them in the mass graves. It's really horrific. It's something which, I mean, no human tragedy was so grave as that perpetrated against children. And it was, mass graves are still being discovered today, with hundreds of bodies, some of them children, women and children, and people still, skeletons still wearing shoes and belts and leather things, which meant that they were not given a decent burial. They were just bulldozed into big holes and just bulldozed. From 82 to 91, we had that civil war, and in 1991, we defeated the troops of Siad Barre, and just closed our border where the British had left them, and started rebuilding our people and bringing our people back from refugee camps. The biggest human movement was recorded by the UN, with the people of Somaliland going into Ethiopia to seek shelter for the bombs that were being dropped on them by other Somalis. So Ethiopia, yeah, it is me. Please, thank you. 1 million Somalilanders were in refugee camps in Harta Sheikh. 250,000 of our people died in that war. 50,000 in Hargeisa town where you lived, most of you. Roads cut up, bridges blown up, wells poisoned, schools bombed. Just total destruction. And at that time, I was working with the World Health Organization. I was based in Djibouti. And I was sent on a mission together with other UN staff to go and monitor the situation in Somaliland, Hargeisa. And I was shocked. I couldn't even walk in the ruins of our house because of the landmines. The human remains, human skeletons were still poking out of the ground. This is in 91, July. There was just one little lane that had been cleared of landmines, and that's the only place that the car could drive. And I felt so hurt and so ashamed to call myself a human being, because this was done by human beings. That I thought, I cannot live with. I need to go back home and try and do something about it. And I cannot bring back the dead, and I cannot stop the bombs from, not having it happened. But what I can do is at least try and help save the ones that will be born, that are still alive. So when I retired in 97, as a very senior UN diplomat, and I had my pension, and I had my terminal benefits, and I had my savings, and I had my trinkets, and I had my Mercedes, and I had my whatever. I just recycled my life and sold everything I could, recycled to cold cash, went home and built this hospital. And I'm going to leave some of these with you. You can, do whatever you like with them, share them, copy them. And that's where I've been for the past 22 years. I live in the hospital. I live on the first floor. And that's my home. And it took me 4 years to build it. I didn't know anything about carpentry and masonry and electrician and plumbing, but I hired whoever I could at the time, who was still could do that job. And I had a lot of help, a lot of blessings, a lot of encouragement, and a lot of discouragement. And the more they discouraged me and said, you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, the more it made me want to do it. So when I did finish it, I thank most of all those who said I couldn't do it, because they really made me do it. It opened in 2002. It started life as a maternity hospital, but a few days later we had our male patients. You have oxygen and somebody comes here with an acute asthma attack. You're not going to say, well, let me find out if he's pregnant or not, and then we can treat him. You say, well, let's give the oxygen and stop the asthma attack and worry about whether he is pregnant or not another time. And that's how we became a hospital, where we have male patients, female patients. So the term maternity hospital no longer applies. It's a hospital. So much so that we get a lot of patients referred to us from neighboring neighboring Ethiopia and Somalia. The people who bombed and killed our people, I treat their children, because a hospital is a hospital, and a hospital has no borders, and a hospital a patient who is sick needs no visa. And I felt that the only way I could stop from what's happening in the Horn of Africa, all the terrorism and the piracy and all the neighboring Somalia, who try to infiltrate Somaliland and try to win over our youth to go and teach them how to blow you and me up, the best way I could fight terrorism was through education. And the pen became my, instead of the Kalashnikov, the pen, knowledge, skills became the weapon I use and I encourage to be used against disorder and terrorism. And in 2011, I had a second baby. This baby was born in 2002, and in 2011, I gave birth to the Eden University. So I have two babies. The hospital I know how to deal with. University is a new problem, with 1,500 students. And if you're going to do something, you've got to do it properly. I try to hire the best, some from Kenya, some from Ethiopia, many from Somaliland. And there are wonderful, wonderful young people with minds that are so hungry for knowledge. In fact, I took Farah hostage there for, how long were you there? 8 months, 10 months? 8 months. She was my hostage for 8 months. Had never been to Somaliland. Her father's Somali, but she'd never been there. And that's the next generation. I'm 82. I could get knocked down by a double-decker, on my way home now. But I want to leave behind, the discipline, the values that have served me so well, the values of honor and the value that human beings deserve to be shown and given. And then come the Scouts, Somaliland Scouts. If somebody has my book, if I may borrow one, I just want to show you pictures. This man, the top one here, my grandfather, Yusuf Goodale, was a signalsman and fought in the First World War. And decorated, he's got war medals, and I don't know what they are, but my grandmother always used to, look after them. I wish I had time to find out what they were and where they are now. The next person is my father, Adam Ismail, who was decorated by Her Majesty the Queen when he retired, and was given the British Empire Medal for services to the Crown. And then I have a brother who went into the army. So I've always been near people who have served in some capacity or other, and sometimes in the military. And when we had a hospital, sick men who, not young anymore, who had health needs came to us, and then through our association we discovered that, they were in the former Somaliland Scouts. And this lady in the pink dress, the Somaliland stamp with the askari on it, that's her father. So her father is the person who was leading the regiment that was welcoming, I think, the Queen when she, Princess Anne or something?
Queen herself in Aden.
In Aden, yeah, to welcome Her Majesty the Queen in Aden. So you have around this table people who have been associated with the army, associated with Britain, and associated with the Somaliland Scouts. And I'm happy to see the neckties that I haven't seen in a long time that you have honored to wear today. But then what could I do? Somebody comes in with a cough or a fever, you can deal with it. But then as they were not younger anymore, they were coming with needs of, chronic diseases and mainly teeth and eyes were failing. And I don't have an ophthalmic department. So we have to refer them to another hospital that charges them money. So we began to, cover them as best we could. Malcolm Page, who today I would have loved to have seen around this table, has been sending out money, sometimes through us, sometimes through somebody else who's coming, or the British, visitors who come. And over the years, and then of course recently, Tony Randall, who I saw in Australia in February, also raised money and sent us £3,100, which is about $4,000 or something like that. Before that, there was 2,000, and then there was a big chunk of 11,000. So over the past 17 or 18 years that we've been looking after the sick, we've had something about, $17,000, $18,000. But when the money runs out, we're still here, and the person who we've been treating comes back, and we just do the best we can. Sometimes they don't even need medicines. Sometimes, they're incontinent. They need, Pampers, things to keep them dry. Sometimes they have their diabetes. They need diabetic medicines. They need insulin. Sometimes they have tuberculosis, and it's something that needs a long treatment. Most of all, they need teeth. they need to chew something, they need to feed, they're malnourished. And we just do the best we can. And whether we have money or not, we look after them, and we will look after them. As long as, we're there. They didn't expect anything from anybody when they gave their lives, when they gave themselves to work in the army, and this is the least we could do for them. There's a whole new lot of generations, their children and their grandchildren, and this becomes a dilemma. It says, my son is sick, or my grandchild is sick. So there's generations. It's developed a multiplier effect that we have to say, look, I have limits. Because my hospital, again, is a non-profit hospital. I still subsidize it with my part of my pension. I live there because I want to save money. I travel, I raise money. There's the Somali, there's the Edna Hospital Foundation in the UK now, which is Rhoda and Farah and Mary Harper of the BBC and Professor and Laura Hammond of London School of Tropical Diseases, Economics, and London School of Oriental African Studies. They're the trustees, and hopefully you will get to know them. But I teach. I get invited to speak in universities. The biggest supporters I have are in the US. I get a lot of volunteers who come and work with me. I have a lot of volunteers who come from King's College in Denmark Hill. And our first team of doctors came out to me 5 days after I opened the hospital. And they did the first surgery there, the first C-sections there, all the charts and the prescription charts and the patient charts that we do. They helped us develop them. And they come to us and teach now and again. They come as external examiners. They've been with us for 18, 19 years. So it carries my name, but it's been carried on the shoulders of many. And in fact, the first beds and the first baby cots that I used were given to me by the British Embassy. So your taxpayers' money is in my hospital. The operating theatre lights were bought for me by Britain. The sterilizers and the operating table were provided to me by Britain. The mannequins that I use to teach the students, the dolls, the adult and the baby dolls and the adult dolls, were given to me by Britain. So that's the country I come from, and that's what your donations have helped us to serve. Of the 1,500 students that we have in the university currently, we've had the ones who graduated from my hospital. And for the first time in the history of my country, I can have a female surgeon assisted by another female surgeon operating on a patient who's been given anesthesia by a Somaliland female anesthetist, assisted by a Somaliland female instrument nurse, supervised by a theatre supervisor who's a Somalilander woman herself. All these are my former trainees. Some of them then I sent off to do medical school. And in a hospital built by an old crazy woman, and all that energy going in to save the life of a male patient on that table. Now that's saying something about Somaliland. A female army of health professionals caring for the sick, regardless of whether he or she is male, female, and who the person who's treating that person, what gender or whatever they are. It's health professionals looking after the sick, period. That's how I train my staff. And in fact, my chief surgeon is someone I almost kicked out when she came to apply to nursing school because she was so young. I said, oh, come on, I can't do anything with this kid. I mean, let her come back in 3 years' time. Let her, grow up a bit. She's too young. What's she doing here? And they said she got good grades. I said, yeah, but she'll get better grades in 3 years' time. I said, then she'll never come back. Okay, but she will waste that space. She remained the top student throughout. Graduated in nursing. Graduated in midwifery. Grew taller. She's taller than I am now. Just had a baby a couple of weeks ago. And I sponsored her and the second one to go and do medical training in Boroma, where we have our first medical school. And again, she's graduated second from the top. And she is my chief surgeon today. That little kid I almost kicked out. So that's Somaliland. And I would love as many of you as possible to come back and visit us again. And I would take it upon myself to convey this message to my president, Musa Bihi Abdi, who I serve with pride, to have you as guests and to visit. And I will take whatever time off, and I will invite Rhoda to come with you. And if I can take Farah hostage again, to drive you around, take you to Boroma. And if you don't mind female drivers, one car I will drive. I haven't learned to drive two cars at the same time. No, the tarmac. Oh, yes, we fix them. Well, some bumpy and potholes, but they're improving. They're improving, and they're being maintained. And then, of course, with this contract in Berbera by Dubai port. The Berbera corridor is being built, and Britain just signed a 38 million pound agreement with Somaliland only a couple of weeks ago. So I would love to have you visit, show you sites that were not there before, try and retrack your steps, see what's left of the old thing, of the old city of Hargeisa and Burma and Berbera and Burao, and come and see how the people still love the British and still remember, the time when Britain was there, when there was law and order, and when there was respect, and there was a command, and the things were done properly, and people remember the British with a whole lot of affection. My biggest problem today is finding enough English language teachers, because we teach in English. And not as volunteers, but to hire. So if you know of anybody who has been taught how to teach English as a second language, 2 or 3 people, I would love to strengthen my English department, which is the weakest department in my university, and teach English. Because the Chinese are chasing after me to teach Mandarin, because a lot of people are trading with China, so they want to teach basic Chinese. The Turks are chasing after us to try and teach Turkish to the students who get scholarships and who get sent to Turkey. But we want to learn English. English is the language that I served as well. And I cannot find English language teachers. So this is another request I'm just leaving with you guys. And just think about it. And if there's a young person who's just graduated from university, 21, 22, 23-year-olds, can come here and do a year out there, the CV will be so enhanced and strengthened. And thank you for looking after the Scouts on behalf of their families and the ones that we look after. I'd like to express this appreciation. And there is a list that the ones, because I'm sorry, some of them are getting off the bus, but the list is the current ones on our list. And we've had pictures taken of them since I came back from Australia, because Tony Randall wanted them, and I got them today. And I think I can leave a copy of those pictures. I think some of them have the names. We gave numbers and their names, so if you have the list, and then you see number 25, and 25 would be that person. We all change as we, I don't look like the 17-year-old who came to Somaliland in 1954, who came to Britain in 1954, nor are they the people you left in 1960. We've lost a few teeth, we've lost quite a bit of hair, we change, we stoop, we're different, but they're still there, and they still remember you, and they remember you with affection. And thank you for this hospitality, and I'm sorry, I hope I haven't bored you too long, but I love doing what I'm doing. I'm so blessed to be doing what I'm doing. And I'm even more blessed to have, the next generation that I know is going to be looking after the country and the people I love so much, with as much passion as I had, and sometimes even more. And we're trying to get more people, children who were born here elsewhere, who've never been to Somaliland, to find their roots again and to redevelop a passion and a link for their people and show the world that all Somalis are not from Somalia, and they're not, all Somalis are not Shabab, all Somalis are not terrorists, all Somalis are not, because we're from Somaliland, and we don't have that. So people one day will learn the difference between Somalia and Somaliland, because when the waters of Somalia are the most pirate-infested waters in the world, and when the waters of Somaliland are pirate-free, that tells the world something. That tells the world something. So thank you also very much. Thank you for your hospitality, for your generosity, and thank you for remembering us. Remembering the time that you've spent with our people. So thank you.
Yeah, I am Rhoda Ibrahim, and I am the director of Somali Archives and Information. Its abbreviation is actually SAFI. We are based in Northwest London, and I came here to study, in fact, women and development in 1989. And while I was studying, the war broke, and I have to ask asylum after my visa expired. But as soon as I got my permission to stay here, I went back to work with UNHCR, did travel a lot in Yemen, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Somaliland. And in 2004, I came back with 2 children, young children, so that they can have the education that they can have. And that's when Somali Archives Information has been established in the school that my children were enrolled in. Had a large Somali community in there who a lot of the parents doesn't speak English. So we started translating for them on our advice and information and guidance, signposting them to the other places that can have. So in 2014, while we were doing, there was a whole part in our organization that's heritage, so that the young Somalis can remember where they come from. But in 2014, we were doing an exhibition with Brand Museum and Archives about the Somalis in Northwest London. And it was about how we came. We were here actually as refugees, not the seamen. That part of London we live. So we were in partnership with the Brand Museum and Archives. And it was at that year that we came to know the First World War, centenary of First World War was launched next to the exhibition we were doing. So it was launched to commemorate 100 years of World War I. So then that's when we asked ourselves, okay, so there are some of our parents or grandparents has really contributed. So let's find out. So we start researching that story itself and concentrating it with the help of Imperial War Museum. The stories we can get, the parents, the children or the grandchildren who live. One of them was really Adna. We have start collecting any photos that's there. That led us to the World War II, which we found out that a lot of you really guys are alive. And when I went to Somaliland in November 2017 to have some of the stories, and I met some of these brave and real Somaliland scouts who fought and is still alive and got wounded. And he still remembers, Ahmed, he still remembers where in Burma, where he was wounded in Edward Valley, and his commander, and all that detail. So really, that's fascinating me. And throughout 2018, we had an exhibition, moving exhibition, which we exhibit 4 places, and over a period of 8 months. So we had this, we produced this kind of a booklet that I can send you when you leave your. And it's been covered a lot by the media as well. So, for example, our local newspaper. It's a story of the bravery of First World War told in Somali, you can have on the table. And that thing is, 100% of the younger people from our community and even the British didn't even know that Somalis were fought in any war. And most of the people who were working with us were the young people from the Somali community and also from the British as well, who were so fascinated and are still part of that project really. And some of the universities covered, for example, London School of Economic History section, that professor became, she heard a lot about our project and she visited us. And she's actually with us until now. So in November 2018, we became friends with Nepalese Gurkha team, which organization, which we actually will live with the same place. And we raised it together. We for the whole of that month, the Popia bill, we really actually pool our efforts and actually raise funding for the pool, which is one of the outcomes, and we will continue that. And that's when then we met Michael Michael Page, and become aware of these fundings that you do, and it is the kind of a thing we really would like to continue. It's more of a continuation of the good work that you all done, and actually teaching the younger children that history of it, continue about it. So that's it. Still, there are young people who are going to university this year who came to ask for an advice really, and history become something that they are interested really to learn, and that part. Thank you so much for inviting me so much really. I am so speechless that I am actually seeing some of you here now, and we would really love to carry on the most beautiful work that you have done it, which is not many people talk about it, even in here. And one of the outcomes was really there are young soldiers, British soldiers, who are part of the in army now, Minister of Defense, who contacted us to do this. Yes. Who really didn't even know that that you guys have worked there, or even Somalis who fought with you, and they want to continue that as well. They want really to help. Whatever you decide to continue for that foundation, we have an army of people here that who really want to continue that. That line. You can have all these.